all fine. Jake, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I'm Jake,
And I'm Cam.
and we've got issues.
So today's issue is a bit of a golden oldie to a lot of comic book fans, and that is Kingdom Come.
Sure. Kingdom Come is by Mark Waid, written by Mark Waid, and the art's by Alex Ross.
So why don't we? So I mean, in this overview, as we normally do, we're going to talk about the story of Kingdom Come, a little bit about the background, considering this one is a bit of an event book as well. So for anyone like myself who is not as familiar with the DC universe as Jake is, for example, will be. I will be expecting him to fill in some of those blanks, and then we'll go over the art and final thoughts. So, Jake, why don't you just start off telling us a little bit about just an overview of the story? So, what is Kingdom Come all about?
Okay. Well, originally this one came in 4 parts in a what DC called prestige format, which The Dark Knight kind of started off. It means the spines. You can actually see the title of the book, and it's printed off in a higher quality printing than the normal comics were back then. Um, and the the basic premise in a nutshell is what would happen like 10 or 15 years into the future to the superheroes that we know of today. And this was put out, like, I think in the late 90s or early 2000s. Wow, it's hard for me to even remember. I picked it up like originally, 1997. Okay. um 1996. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, 1996. So the essentially it's trying to see what the heroes of 1996 would be like in about 15-20 years into the future. And what happens is kind of like a dystopian future where heroes are causing just as much havoc as villains. And there's no order, because the original troika of heroes led by Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman disbanded for reasons that will be put in the book. And so as we
yeah,
follow along, we're put into this dystopian future where it's going to get even worse unless something happens. And we're put into the shoes of Norman McKay, who is a pastor, and kind of like the eyes of the events. He's the
yeah.
witness to all of this, and actually that's why it's called Kingdom Come, because it has religious overtones to it. And of course this comes from the Our Father prayer in Catholic circles.
And I also think Norman represents um, the everyman, the if you like the civilian perspective on this entire event, right?
Yes, yes. In which case, it's really cool because you'll of course draw parallels to Marvel's later, which is a book that came after this,
Yeah,
where they have a very similar uh, protagonist. But
yeah,
this one is kind of cool because it has uh, Norman McKay is basically enlisted by the Spectre, one of DC's oldest heroes, and who is, spoiler alert, probably an angel himself. Um, and the Spectre kind of takes him through this whirlwind of events on Earth in the future,
yeah.
wherein a cataclysm is supposed to come. Um, and well, I'm not going to spoil it so much. Uh, Go ahead,
Yeah,
Cam.
yeah. I mean, well, it is an interesting story in that it is quite philosophical in terms of its framing of asking the question of what 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 is the difference between vigilantism and um, justice and the true meaning of bringing justice to our communities. And and how much good do these heroes really bring to our lives, and how much negativity can they also that can result from their actions. And perhaps the best way of framing that in this story is that since the original heroes, as you say, led by Superman, Wonder Woman, and etc. Once they leave, and to be honest, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the motivations for their leaving are somewhat ambiguous. However, we just know that several years ago they left. They gave up their mantle as heroes of our generation, and basically almost disappeared into sort of their own private lives. So Superman is back on a farm and just really, I guess, just living a quiet life. And in the meantime, however, there's an uprising of new vigilantes who, unlike the original heroes, have no schooling in what it means to be a true hero, if you like, or somebody who's responsible for their actions, because these guys are completely reckless, and there's a lot of infighting. They fight each other. They pretty much cause a whole lot of chaos and collateral damage and harm a lot of people in the process. So they don't exactly help, but at the same time, they aren't they aren't really framed as villains either, because they seem to not really know what they're doing. They're
Mhm.
just, if you like, they're just unhinged. They just don't have any source of sort of role models to guide them with all of this power. So it is very much. I know this is a DC story, but it does harken back to that idea of in Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility, and in this case, these new I say heroes, but vigilantes have no responsibility but great power. So um,
Well,
absolute chaos ensues.
I would add to that that
Yeah.
the story is actually a lot about like the relationship between the superheroes and mankind.
Mm.
The big pivot point that you see in the story, without giving too much away, is the fact that Superman is embroiled in um, Superman is embroiled in something big, uh, and then there's an antagonist hero also who has done something, and the public has to decide who's right or wrong. And the public actually decides that it's the anti-hero's actions that are justified, not Superman's, which makes Superman leave the public spotlight, and with him that certain sense of responsibility and control and decency. We'll see that in the book itself, wherein that choice made by the public themselves kind of unleashes this other wave of superheroes with no control. So it's a constant back and forth theme between like what mankind has to do in order to come to grips with these types of gods among them, or these types of
Mm.
powers among them, and how like mankind tries to um reconcile itself with these with beings of these, with these kinds of powers. Again,
Yeah.
it's a it's actually, if you really think of the whole story in itself, it's very dark throughout, with a little threadbare with a little thread of hope in the protagonist. Um,
Yeah.
and of course, it wouldn't be it wouldn't sell if it didn't have some sort of crisis, and the crisis is actually kind of with the heroes themselves, and uh, how they kind of manage to maybe control themselves or find a different way of being in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you? So, I mean, another aspect of the story that I'd like to hear your opinion on is the prison that was created for these enhanced humans. So they're kind of, I guess it's for super villains, but
Mhm.
um, and then the civil infighting takes place in that prison. Um, what kind of commentary do you think that was trying to make in terms of the superhero supervillain pantheon? Um,
Well,
what did you get from that?
I mean, if you here's where we kind of start with it, and I love this is where they put the essentially Superman and the other heroes. If they try to they try to impose a certain type of order with the newer generation, and those who don't cooperate, they put into this prison. The artist or the story writers were making a commentary of like actually these actions can be deemed as wrong because the prison that they put the heroes in is actually looks like the headquarters of the Legion of Doom, which is the enemy of the Justice League,
Oh, okay.
right? And then there's another one I think wherein I think the UN building itself, or is it the UN building? Let me see. I love these little. This is what we mean by okay, here's the UN building, and this is a little nod to something else from the same thing that I mentioned before. Does the building look familiar, Cam? If you didn't watch Super Friends, it won't.
Nope, not to me. No.
The UN building is a facsimile of the Hall of Justice, which is where the
Okay.
Super Friends lived, where Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman's headquarters were in the
Okay.
original cartoon. So little
Hmm.
nods to that say like, okay,
Yeah.
wait, there is a light side and a dark side in a way,
Yeah.
and sometimes humanity is actually trying to protect itself from what's happening. So there's little nods to that by the creators that say, oh, wait a second,
Yeah.
what mankind kind of was justified in uh well, I'm not going to spoil it, but in its actions.
I mean, what did you gather in terms of yeah, Superman and the rest of the old guard make a decision that if they aren't going to if a superhero or again a vigilante isn't going to play by their rules or the rules that they set out, they
Hmm.
put them in this prison. Um, how do you think that plays into the overall sort of the message of Kingdom Come?
I think what it is Superman has always been um the there's a bit of a uh an overtone of what the possibilities for Superman are. And that's DC Comics has played with that, especially into the 21st century. If you're Are you familiar with the video game Injustice?
No, I've heard of it,
Injustice
but I've
Yeah,
not played it.
Injustice Gods Among Us. The plot is basically um there's an alternate Earth where the superheroes all live in that kind of reality, but it diverges when a tragedy happens to Superman. Um and Superman basically becomes this the overlord of Earth. He basically says, "No more. I want to control everything, and I'm going to enlist all of the Justice League to help me do it." Um,
Yeah,
and the plot is the only person who doesn't want to help him is Batman because he knows that that's tyranny. And this has this comic book actually came before that, and it starts to establish this thing wherein Superman, without humanity's blessing, tries to do what is right. Um, and that's because he doesn't think that he has a choice but to kind of control the superheroes who
yeah,
don't want to come under his wing. Um, he doesn't know any other options. He's been so out of in isolating himself from humanity. He's isolated
yeah,
his own humanity in a way,
yeah.
and that's a big theme of this book.
Hmm.
Um, is the fact that Superman has to see another point of view that isn't coming from like the things that Superman would have to do in order to control, but in order to make to make to bridge understanding, to make peace.
Yeah.
You know.
And I'd like to bring in another important point here, since we're talking about the the assumption Superman has in terms of his role and his duty to almost to impose his own law on all the other
Mm,
superheroes. The real spanner in the works is Batman. So Bruce Wayne in this is a very different Bruce Wayne to what we're typically used to, right?
right.
He's a very cynical. I mean, yeah, he's a cynical guy anyway in every rendition, but here he's much more detached from his original, if you like, motivations for being a vigilante. Now he's taken a step back. He is more of a sort of an observer to the world at large now. And he's very much opposed to Superman's um, predisposition of this almost godlike character now. And yeah, and I like the way he's drawn as well. I mean, obviously he's an old guy now, but he he's kind of again Alex Ross with some really interesting design there for the kind of skeletal frame that he has, because he's
Yeah.
probably so broken at this point that he probably wouldn't even be able to stand up without some kind of mechanical aid. But um,
Mm,
yeah, so him teaming up with Lex Luthor as well is an interesting kind of twist.
mm.
And what are your thoughts on Batman's role in the story?
Well, if you really think about it, again, a little bit of a nod. Look at this little support piece for his neck. This is, can you spot the homage?
No,
The shape of this support piece, this triangular piece.
no.
This is the bottom half of Darth Vader's mask.
Oh, is it? Okay, so I didn't realize it. Oh, it is actually. Yeah, you're right.
It's exactly the bottom half. And
Yeah,
of course,
I
I
never.
know this from reading like the little art nods, but they
Yeah,
made that specifically as a nod to the fact that Bruce is becoming a little bit more, well, actually he's becoming a bit of a cyborg himself, or he's also the thing is, a lot of them in this book, the original three, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman,
yeah,
all have to come to grips with certain elements of their, I would say, creation, but just their ethos that they were created as.
yeah,
um they have to kind of come to grips with how they have how they have coped with the new reality, and is it the same as they were what they were created for. Um and it's not just Superman who has to come to grips with his humanity. I think Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman themselves have these story arcs that are really great, and have these really great closures by the end, where they kind of go like, wait,
mm,
am I like doing the things that I would have done when I originally started this, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
in which case, again, this little nod to Darth Vader gives you a little bit of a nod as to what the creators think. It's like, whoa, there's some dark themes underlying this, what
yeah.
the heroes are trying to do, or even just with the costumes themselves.
Mm. Yeah, and Batman has a very interesting story arc in Kingdom Come, and it. I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but it doesn't play out the way you think it will once you get to know his character, and again his very odd, unexpected sort of collaboration with Lex Luthor. I didn't expect that, given the relationship Lex Luthor has had with any of the heroes in the DC universe.
Right.
But he's a very interesting character. He does evolve during the story, and I'd say that about Superman as well, and Wonder Woman. However, and here's maybe my something that I found less maybe less positive is that because this story has such a large cast of characters, like a really large cast of characters, I don't feel that they all necessarily have enough time to shine, enough time to develop in the same way that the three principal heroes do. Would you say there's any truth in that, or do you think that's fair to say?
Well, I think that really a lot of it is being carried by the main three, mainly Superman. It's Superman, Batman. It's a story about Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. It basically closes with
Yeah,
them. Um,
yeah,
and and then the everyman, which is Norman McKay, right? Like he helps to
yeah,
resolve the issues that are present. You can't really go through with a whole. You're basically dealing with the future of a whole bunch of superheroes, so they're all gonna get introduced, and
mm,
you're gonna really rely on um you knowing the backstory of a lot of these characters and kind of going like, oh, so
yeah,
that's what he's going to look like in the future. Oh, so
yeah,
that's what he's going to end up as. You know,
yeah.
um, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that perhaps the character who maybe has changed the least, at least from a character standpoint, is Wonder Woman. Um, I feel like she's almost the character the hero who is um, trying to pull everyone together. Because it certainly isn't Superman, and it definitely isn't Batman, and she's the one who's kind of caught in the middle, trying to bring all these powers together. Do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on Wonder Woman here? I thought she was a really cool character, actually.
Well, the great part about Wonder Woman is this is the Wonder Woman that's supposed to happen. That's supposed to kind of come out of the current continuity at that time, the 1990s continuity of Wonder Woman,
Yeah,
which was then originated or re-originated from the Crisis by George Perez.
right.
Um, and that one, the character of Wonder Woman was basically um, a character that's supposed to bring peace through teaching.
Mm,
Um, and what happens to this Wonder Woman is that um, the other Amazons on her home basically say, "Well, you've actually failed. The world isn't even the world isn't better. You know, it's actually worse." So
yeah.
because she's been rejected by her own people, then she tries a different way of being, which is more more controlling and more violent, like the soldier part
Mm,
of being an Amazon instead of the peace giving part or the educator part of being an Amazon. So again, the what happens in Kingdom Come is really related to what happens in the DC comics of the 1980s and 1990s. It's
mm,
what was so striking about it was if you were reading DC comics from the 80s and 90s forward and then you saw Kingdom Come, you're just like, this is the resolution of all the stuff that's been happening with the heroes presently. Wow, it's so fascinating. You know, you didn't know it was going
yeah,
to turn that dark.
yeah. It is very much an end of days storyline, which again, I think maybe this is a something, I mean, that I personally struggled with, but there were a lot of threads in this where I felt went over my head,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't familiar with a lot of the backstories of some of these characters. So when Shazam shows up towards the end, you
Mm-hmm.
know, he I mean, he's one of the he's a principal character in the sort of a very a fateful decision made by Superman, which I don't want to spoil, but it does. Again, if you're not really familiar with Shazam's character and the fact that he has a duality to his character, which I learned later because I actually had read other stories within his some of his runs, but had I not know, at the time when I read it, I didn't really know anything about Shazam, so I didn't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
appreciate the fact that he was so important to the culmination of sort of the story, the build up to the story, and the important role that he played at the end. I didn't really appreciate it, and I think that's something that I think anyone who wants to read Kingdom Come, I would say yeah, you can read it if you're unfamiliar with the DC universe, but you get so much more from it if you have even the slightest bit of background knowledge on most of the principal characters. Um,
Right.
you know what I
Well, I
mean?
mean, I do know what you mean. It's like for me, like Shazam itself and the Shazam's resolution, the character arc is both really entertaining and really sad.
Yeah,
As Shazam itself, coming from like Fawcett Comics, Shazam wasn't originally part of DC continuity. It was actually a copy of Superman. Um,
yeah.
back then in the I think 50s and 60s when he was created, and
Wasn't he called Captain Marvel?
yeah, he's Captain Marvel, and so
Yeah,
he's the original Captain Marvel, and of course he's the leader of the Marvel family and all that, and there's a whole bunch of continuity which is really fun. Um, but the the thing is, Shazam has to be there to counter in a way what Superman, the almighty powers of Superman, because in a way Shazam is Superman himself. He was made as a copy of Superman, um uh as an idea, and
yeah,
he's like he's now become the antithesis. So you're right, Cam. You have to know a little bit of backstory. You wouldn't be as tickled pink if you didn't know Shazam's backstory, and
yeah,
even knowing like his powers and his sets and abilities. Like he's the perfect counter to Superman. He's the only
yeah.
equal to Superman in a way. But they used the his character perfectly in
Mm.
this. I just wish it had a happier resolution.
Yeah, and I think that's why the dramatic impact of Shazam's decision towards, as I said, towards the story's climax, was lost on me the first time I read it, but having gone back and looked at it again, having known more about Shazam as a character, it definitely adds a whole lot more to the story, and the impact of that particular part of the story, that narrative beat. So, um, and I'd like to say that in comparison to Marvel's, if you like, answer to the story, which is with Marvel's, I found that one to be a lot more accessible in that respect because I thought it was more of a self-contained story. Whereas I think there's a lot of with Kingdom Come, there's a lot going on. It's a very layered, multi-layered story that is. I think it almost gives you more the more that you understand where these storylines are coming from or where they originated from. So it it's I think it's one of those stories where you get what you put into the DC universe. So the more you've committed yourself to the DC universe and understanding the universe, the more you get out of the story. Is that fair to say? Because I think that's the
Oh
best way I
yeah.
can put it.
Oh yeah.
You know?
This is kind of like a payoff to being a fanboy.
Yeah,
Um, and it was so successful. It was so kind of groundbreaking in that sense. That every like Marvel clamored for it. They were just like, "Dang, we need something like that. Something to kind of celebrate our in this sense, it kind of celebrates everything about like DC Comics heroes.
yeah,
Even in its resolution, it's dark, but it
yeah,
doesn't get as dark as it's not as somber as the Dark Knight in a way.
mm,
I think it's way more. It's really just like what I said. It's a homage. It's a homage to every little bit of thing that you could know, the little details of
yeah,
being a DC Comics fan, even from back then in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. There you'll see little nods here.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, but let's move on. Let's move on to the art then, which, as you can see from those panels, is classic Alex Ross. This painterly, um, absolutely
Yeah.
almost photorealistic look. What did you think of the art? It was
Oh,
phenomenal, but I'm a big Alex Ross fan.
it blows you away. Like it
Yeah.
just blows you away. Like Alex
Mm,
Ross, of course, uses painting technique and
yeah.
uses actual figure studies. He has actual models of um,
Yeah.
the people that the heroes in this book. So you can't get any better.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when you have that technique married with little references to even this panel here with Superman holding this tractor
Yeah.
should remind people of what of the original Action Comics #1,
Mm.
wherein Superman is holding a vehicle and about to smash it.
Yeah.
So
The it's a police car, right? Or is it? Or is it a
it's
car?
an automobile. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a gangster's automobile, and he's
Yeah.
smashing it.
It's on the front cover, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on the front cover of Action Comics #1, and this is a
Yeah.
homage to Superman.
Mm.
If you don't see his actual costume, you know that it's him because he's doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that Alex Ross uses actors for a lot of the I should say reference points to his art it gives it quite a unique look as well. It makes it almost adds a more film like cinematic sort of feel because it is about as photorealistic as it gets in comics, and that's aside from how sometimes in manga certain manga anyway they use a lot of photo reference, not just manga actually, Western comics as well, photo reference sort of panels for backgrounds like buildings and things like that, whereas Alex Ross takes actual people, real life models, real life actors, and then doesn't use them as photo reference, but rather remodels them, redraws them in a way that is almost the inverse of, I don't know, it's almost like rotoscoping, but not rotoscoping. You see what I mean? It's a very unique process. I think he has, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he has one of the most unique sort of workflows as an artist, and it really does shine in this story and in Marvel's. But it's a thing to behold, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is really. If anything, just buy it to just really get the lavish art. I mean,
Yeah,
you could. I mean, these folks could just pop right off the pages. You would believe that. You would believe that. These guys were like Captain Marvel and like Batman as Bruce Wayne. That's what Batman should look like when he's older.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing I want to point out is that well, I mean, for myself, I came across Kingdom Come. I was in my local Waterstones, which in the UK is kind of like a Borders. It's like our big bookstore, and I was there one day, and I came across Kingdom Come, and I looked at the front cover, and it's not that particular cover, the one that you've got. It was another trade paperback volume, but it was this collected edition had it was one of the newer ones, but it has all of the superheroes kind of midair, sort of flying.
Sure. Yeah.
And you've seen the splash anyway. It's somewhere in the book, but um, I saw that, and this was my introduction to Alex Ross. This was maybe, I don't know, it was a long while ago, but and I picked it up, and I thought, what the heck is this? That's the shot. Maybe you want to, yeah, there you go. Um, that was used as a cover, and I
Hmm.
just thought, who drew this? This is really really incredible, and that was my introduction to Alex Ross. So, if anything, I bought that book purely based on the art because I didn't know anything about the story.
Hmm.
Um, and that led to me wanting to read Marvels and pretty much anything Alex Ross has really touched. I think he's a phenomenal artist. But that's it for me with the art. I think it's just it's as good as it gets, as you say. I can't really say much more than that.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't say any more than that. It's
right.
really, really great, and you should, if anything, just pick it up just because,
Yeah,
just to see the art. But
absolutely.
yeah,
So how about our closing thoughts then on Kingdom Come? Then I'll let you give your take first.
um, I th- I I picked it up when it first came out. I loved it back then. I reread
Yeah.
it. I
Did you,
reread it
by the
every
way,
couple of
did
years.
you buy it in singles or
Oh
did you
yeah,
get it as a
I have
collected?
this in I have this in singles.
Okay.
Yeah, it's somewhere in my collection in a box.
Yeah. Cool.
um, and yeah, I've got this. I think just so I got this. Maybe it's mine, or maybe my brother. It's my brother's, and he handed it off to me. Um, it's for final thoughts for it. It can't be beat. I mean,
Mm,
it's hard to beat this as far as like just the story and the art and the premise. Um, all make you really love being a DC fanboy.
mm,
And a comic book and a superhero fanboy. You know, you don't have to, even if it's just a comic book fanboy and you're not into superheroes, you just look at the art. It's just really great to see.
yeah.
Everything's classically composed.
Mm,
Um, what can I say? What can I say? In retrospect, they did a lot of things with these characters. Through the years, like Kingdom Come Superman has entered like the normal DC universe. Um, and DC loves doing that. Like their characters. This is originally an Elseworlds print. See, the Elseworlds meaning that it's an alternate universe, of course, from the normal DC continuity. But
yeah.
they love the premise of having these infinite Earths, and the Crisis kind of um showed us that there's many different possibilities for these heroes. But the fun part comes when this Superman gets to meet the normal Superman of continuity, and what kind of banter they will have.
You're
Um,
talking about events after Kingdom Come, right?
yes, that's right. And I'm not going to
Yeah.
spoil a lot of stuff, but
Okay.
there are some comics that have been written about the characters afterwards, and to me, sure, you can have fun and do that, but it kind of takes away from the original work where you're just like, okay, well, I really hope that that everything resolves after this, even after I don't see what happens later. I hope
Yeah.
that those characters, will be able to live lives as best as they can. But and later on, you're just like, oh, okay, so I guess that happens. I didn't really think
Yeah.
that would happen, and I just want to. Maybe my point is, I just enjoy it for what it is. I remember it for what it is from
Yeah.
beginning to end, and I want the end to be the end.
Yeah. And I would say for my closing thoughts, I didn't know anything about Kingdom Come until, as I said, I discovered the book in that Waterstones. But I think for me, Kingdom Come is not so much maybe an end, but rather a beginning. So, not to
Mhm.
sound too cryptic there, but for me, it's about looking back at the DC universe, and this being, as I said, the beginning of that backtracking, that journey back for me as a new reader, as
Oh,
somebody who is only just unearthing a lot of the layers and the mythology behind this particular universe, and there's so much I've discovered since I read Kingdom Come. I've gone and picked individual characters like Shazam, for example, and I've gone and read other stories from that character, and then realized, oh, okay, so now I understand what was happening in Kingdom Come in terms of the gravity of his decision at the end of that story. And it's about I'm almost connecting the dots looking back. Um,
yeah, yeah.
at, and it's a great. I think it's almost a bit of a for me. It's a little bit of a contradiction on the one hand, it isn't the most accessible story for a new DC reader or somebody who's perhaps just starting out as a DC reader. Um, Me now, for a few years, I've gone back and started to read a lot of books within the DC universe, and I was more of a Marvel person before that, but now I'm kind of 50-50. But it was I think, although it was fairly inaccessible to me in a lot of ways, it was a great starting point for me, as I said, to look at where things end up in the future and work your way back to where
Mhm.
do these characters start. And from that point of view, looking at it from that point of view, I think it actually works really well because I'm interested enough to want to go back and see where how all of these events may have unfolded and where the source of all of those conflicts arose from. So yeah, it's a great story. Many consider it to be the greatest DC story. I honestly can't comment on that because I haven't I haven't read every DC story, but I can say it's worthy of the praise it gets, and the artwork is really worth the price of admission for me, and it's what got me on board in the first place. But yeah, highly recommended pick. This was
Mm.
your pick actually, Jake, on this occasion. So that's
Cheers.
about it. Shall we close up this episode?
Yeah, yeah. Before we close, just wanted to let people know to subscribe and to like our channel, and to
Yeah,
spread the word because every like and subscribe helps out,
yeah,
uh, and gets us to a wider audience. Um,
definitely. And also, please do comment in the comment section. Tell us what you think of Kingdom Come, because sometimes I suppose people can be a little bit divisive in terms of, is it really the greatest DC story ever? Well, tell us why or why not. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
yeah, or
But
even just put in the comments like the little things that you noticed, the little details that you noticed. Like the Darth Vader mask for Batman.
that's a good
For
idea.
me,
Yeah, I like
yeah,
that.
just
Yeah,
just say like, okay, wait, this is actually like the Hall of Justice or the Legion of Doom's headquarters, or
yeah.
things that you saw that were little nods to your own childhood or little nods to pop culture, because there was a lot of nods to pop culture in there that
Oh
aren't
yeah,
DC.
yeah.
Did you catch the fact that they're in the holodeck within the farm?
Oh
Yep.
yeah, actually, yeah. That was a nice little nod uh, to Star Trek there. But awesome. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode because we always enjoy recording and putting these together. And until next time, take care and we will see you soon.
Okay.